Arctic is changing. Beneath our feet and in the oceans, across borders and countries, change is occurring rapidly and is widespread. Temperatures in the Arctic are rising at twice the rate of the rest of the world. Patterns of snow and ice cover are shifting. Migratory species and those unique to the Arctic are altering their behavior and changing locations, while industrial development and resource exploitation are directly impacting traditional livelihoods. On land, insects and plants are creeping north and changing the dynamics of entire ecosystems, leading to a ripple effect on larger species, including reindeer, which are a key element of indigenous life. In the ocean, sea ice supports a vast array of life and represents vital habitat for fish, mammals, and birds. Early warning signs of sea ice loss have significant implications for marine life. The interlinkages between these complex issues are still not well understood and require in-depth investigation and analysis. The Arctic Council is getting a clearer picture of what is happening to the Arctic environment, what is there and what is affecting it. The Arctic Biodiversity Assessment is a long-term scientific assessment to determine how Arctic biodiversity is reacting to the significant changes occurring in the region. The implications of rapid Arctic change are global and highlight the need for increased interdisciplinary research. Change on this scale affects everybody, everywhere. Arctic terrestrial ecosystems are under increasing pressures from climate change, habitat fragmentation, industrial development, and a host of other stressors. Exactly how these pressures affect terrestrial species and ecosystems is still not well understood, because the Arctic's complexity and size make it difficult to detect and attribute change. For the 4 million people living in the Arctic, this is creating both challenges and opportunities. But how much? And at what rate can the planet tolerate change? At what point does the natural environment reach a tipping point?
Few people speak really about the terrestrial ecosystems problem because they don't really recognize that a large part of Arctic is in the terrestrial zone, not in the ocean.
In the Arctic, it should be cold in winter and we should have snow everywhere. But more and more now we're seeing the snow disappear for a few days in the middle of winter. When the snow disappears, the temperatures go up. When the temperatures go down, the snow isn't there, so the plants are exposed to very low temperatures and are damaged. When the snow goes, the lemmings and other animals under the snow lose their habitat, they're visible to predators, and their populations crash. And the whole cascading effects, all due to an event. So just a few days in the winter may actually control what you see in terms of biodiversity or productivity for years afterwards.
И несколько примеров можно привести. Это изменения в растительном покрове. То есть, допустим, в тундре сегодня оленеводы видят, что линия от деревьев, она все ближе и ближе к северу идет. И несколько лет назад, например, это была тундра, а сегодня уже там можно увидеть лес. Вот это, конечно же, тоже влияет на методы ведения оленеводства. Следующее изменение в температурном режиме приводит к изменению в насекомых, которые, допустим, в некоторых местах раньше не встречались, но сегодня даже появляются некоторые виды насекомых, которых никогда в этом районе не было. Ну и также есть изменения в фауне, когда появляются новые виды животных, приходят, допустим, ближе к северу.
If the snow is a bit deeper, that actually protects last year's buds because they'll grow up anywhere from a few to a couple tens of centimeters in a year, but a lot of that will get wind blasted off the next winter. But if the snow is deeper, it'll protect that, and the woody plant will be able to form stronger tissue and withstand the next winter. If you have several winters with deeper snow, you're going to have taller shrubs. So we're looking at change from tundra to forest.
Of particular concern is how these unpredictable variations are affecting the culture and traditional lifestyles of Arctic indigenous peoples.
Tällä tjauhtsan jo alke saakasti, että me min täällä viikolla tahka ja mitä pahuva ja tällä paitsi saami ja numis paitsi saami nuorehkaska tällä tavalla saakastella mä läht ja tehtäs tällä palloni mutta tämä paltaa kuin muu ennen kuin sitä talkariudan tällä mitä talkariudan miltä spukta että pohte ennen olla muut pohte nuko taka fitnodaga mahkaleke rogga etnami ja taka biegamilluprojekti heitä käydä pohtet no tiistä talkkaa taka riudan tahpahuva mutta ehkä min pirke tänja mutta jos tiedät tahmi chuvutin ja talkkaa riudan min taholamu ma pohte ja
Some of the most dramatic changes associated with climate warming have occurred in Arctic marine and freshwater environments. In recent decades, the polar ice cap has been shrinking steadily and water in the Arctic Ocean has been warming, threatening the balance of the ecosystem. It is also opening areas rich in oil and gas and bringing the possibility of new, shorter shipping routes through Arctic waters. But sea ice itself represents a unique and complex ecosystem on which a vast array of biodiversity depends. Algae forming on or under the ice feeds a complex assortment of microorganisms. These in turn nourish fish, birds and marine mammals such as seals and whales. Human populations in the region and around the world rely on various marine and freshwater species to sustain their livelihoods and health.
Humans tend to think that the oceans are just forever, but we already have, signs that they are getting heavily affected by human activity. Fish stocks are crashing here and there, and it's a delicate balance between harvesting and ensure that we're conserving the species. The Arctic char is actually an example of species that cannot survive higher temperatures, and we have indication of that, and that is a concern.
We see fish stocks moving in the ocean. One of the reasons for the now famous mackerel dispute between the European Union, Norway, Iceland and the Faroe Islands is in fact that a fish stock that nobody had ever heard of in my youth and 10 years ago was not fished in Iceland at all, has now become a major part of our fishing industry due to the transformation in the ocean.
I live at the Varanger Fjord, which is opening towards the Barents Sea. Fishermen are very optimistic in our region. They are very happy. Young people buy boats because there's over 5-6 years been a tremendous cod fishery in the fjord. But my concern is that this might be a changing or a passing change, that if the ocean temperature rises even more, the cod might migrate to even colder water or look for colder water.
It is not just ocean temperatures that are changing, but the physical makeup of the ocean. Freshwater discharge is making the ocean less salty, which results in unpredictable ice formation and thickness.
So the freshwater discharge into the Arctic Ocean has been detected for a while. There's questions about attribution, where it's all coming from. Certainly thawing permafrost might be one, but it's can't be the only thing. So big implications for ice cover in the Arctic, more fresh water, lower salinity.
Well, the ice conditions in some of the communities that are whaling communities are affected in that the timing for ice, where the ice is safe enough to go out on in the springtime for the spring hunt, that is changing. The ice is thinner. It actually breaks up earlier in the season, so it affects whaling, and it means everything. The fish and the animals that Inuit hunt and subsist on, It's not just nutritional subsistence, it's also satisfying culturally, and the traditional life that Inuit live revolves around the hunting season. So hunting and fishing describes who we are as a people. It's the ultimate important thing in our culture.
Kissettikkiartuami taamatimamsiku issuallarunnarniku 70-sikkun 80-sikkun isusooriorussusaanarpsiku 2 meter alla ilaatu angullu 2 meter anguallu alla issusseqartaaluarpsiku ila massakkut taami hian ukiarman sikuu quinartam ila sikuungaangat maani pilluarta inuisarpu.
Recent biodiversity research in the Arctic has revealed far greater ecological interconnectedness in the region than previously thought. The loss of a single species or function could have dramatic and cascading effects, resulting in total ecosystem restructuring. Historically, the Arctic has been a resilient ecosystem, but the rate and extent of change it is facing are calling into question the ability of the system to adapt. The complex interplay between terrestrial, freshwater and marine systems shape the overall Arctic ecology and the goods and services that Arctic biodiversity provides. These circumstances and experiences help to shape culture and language. When these conditions disappear, it erodes what makes the Arctic a unique ecological and richly cultural place.
Well, of course, it is a great loss when we have less of biodiversity, and if the ice cap is slowly disappearing in the summer, of course, there will be great change, and that is very negative in itself. And it will affect the communities living of the biodiversity. You can hunt and other things. So, of course, everything connects in the big part, and especially with indigenous peoples who live very close to the nature, and they live off the nature very closely.
I think the cultural diversity is something that gets undersold. We see the polar bear or the snowy owl up there, and people are worried about that. But I think we should also be concerned about cultural diversity. That I've spent my career looking at combined social and ecological systems, and they go together.
Even our younger people have seen a lot of change. More people are getting medical conditions related to the increase in temperature or humidity. One thing for sure is it will affect our culture. In our languages, we have certain words for conditions, whether it's summer or fall or winter, or different types of animals. And if we are unable to hunt or go picking berries in certain areas, then we lose part of our language, because I think language is part of biodiversity.
In the past 200 years, 21 Arctic languages have been lost at an alarmingly increasing rate. Half of those have disappeared since 1990.
Tehtäisiin juoga lahpu. Det on joballa kohti, että chuvu anja tahal vaikka olles servohkita, kun jos jeekielunno tekee lahpu ja minä ja puhutut nellaku ja puhutut lahpu, no tahalla pia mu mehtselli ja olamuja, mutta no halla olles luonte arktalas koulu, mehtellä ollieslas kova ja min tarpi viso hoosi, just kalakaa pirke pohtaa eikä.
Climate change, contaminants, habitat fragmentation, and industrial development are emerging as the most far-reaching and significant stressors on Arctic biodiversity. Long-term observations based on the best available traditional and scientific knowledge are urgently needed to identify changes in biodiversity and to help develop new and innovative adaptation strategies.
And the Conservation of Arctic Flora and Fauna Working Group allows the 8 Arctic nations and all the various networks, scientists, Aboriginal experts and others that are behind their own regional efforts can bring those together to actually start to cooperate and really squeeze as much value out of very, very limited capacity that we have in the Arctic to understand the big changes that are occurring.
To better understand what is happening, the Arctic Council launched the Arctic Biodiversity Assessment, an investigation into the status and trends of biodiversity in the Arctic. The Arctic Biodiversity Assessment is a process 7 years in the making and has involved over 300 scientific and traditional ecological knowledge experts from around the globe.
What we're trying to do with the Arctic Biodiversity Assessment is to synthesize all existing information on the status and trends of Arctic biodiversity, with the end product being a baseline which will indicate what we do know, where there are gaps in our knowledge, where there are emerging trends or areas that we need to be concerned about. We're also in the process of implementing what we call the CBMP, or the Circumpolar Biodiversity Monitoring Programme. And the idea is that this monitoring programme will form the engine which will feed further information into this baseline. The overall aim is then to provide a framework or a system that will not be just a one-off products, but rather a means to better deliver information and better inform policy that is developed within the Arctic to respond to issues ranging from climate change to exploitation and exploration.
The Arctic is changing twice as fast in terms of climate warming than the rest of the world. So climate change is really happening there, where people living in Europe may not be convinced it's really happening because they're not seeing very great differences. The Arctic is. For example, what happens to biodiversity in the Arctic to migratory species will affect what happens in the overwintering grounds of those species. What happens to the melting glaciers and permafrost thaw will affect the sea level rise. So there are these teleconnections between the Arctic and the rest of the world. So that's what has grabbed the attention of the rest of the world. Number one, they don't like to see the polar bear disappear. They don't like to see the snow and ice disappear. But number two, if you live in a low-lying area, you will be affected by what happens in the Arctic.
The processes that will change biodiversity in the Arctic will dramatically affect the lives of people all over the world, in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, in cities and villages, in deserts, as well as in fields. So by measuring and monitoring biodiversity in the Arctic, we create a warning system for people in other parts of the world what could happen to their future.
The Arctic plays host to a vast array of biodiversity, including many globally significant wildlife populations. It is the permanent home to unique cold-adapted species found nowhere else on Earth. It is the temporary home for millions of birds and mammals that migrate annually to benefit from the bounty of the short but productive Arctic summer. It is home of vibrant and diverse cultures, deeply connected to the land, ice, and sea. The magnitude of current global changes threatens the Arctic's ability to function. This not only has implications for the species and peoples that directly rely on it for life, but has global repercussions, affecting all life on Earth.
Seen from a global biodiversity point of view, the most unique Arctic flora and fauna, that is the so-called endemic species in the Arctic, those species that are only found in the Arctic, they may suffer, they may even disappear entirely from the globe when the different climate belts move north following climate change. So we may face a situation with improved living conditions in the Arctic, but a big loss of diversity in the world.